Aloha and welcome to Java. Thank you kindly for joining me. It is Friday, January 12th, 2024, and there is a lot in this episode if you can stay until the end. And if you have any comments on this, I would really appreciate this one. So, we've got a quote that I would like to start with. This is by Christine Lagarde back in October 2019. She's the president of the European Central Bank. So she was saying we should be happier to have a job than to have our savings protected. This was back at the time that they had chosen to let inflation run hot so that it was basically soaking up people's savings so they wouldn't have anything to fall back on. So let's go into the markets really quickly. We've got the MMRI, it's relatively stable at the moment. However, we're watching relative strength of the dollar and the 10-year yield are increasing. So as these move up, they're going to put pressure on the markets. So we've got a slight bit of a fear trade going on to where money is moving into gold. The volatility index, which is kind of the fear indicator, is going up. And we've got the futures, which are in agreement of the pressure incoming. So moving a little more into commodities, slight fear. We're watching the PPI comes out today. Also, more information on oil and energy, as well as the financials, because banks report their earnings today. In particular, JP Morgan, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo, and Citigroup. Citigroup had some negative news out. Got a couple of positions on these. JP Morgan looking strong and soaking up the rest. So in the calendar, we've got that PPI that will be coming out prior to the market open, and then some numbers affecting crude. So yesterday we had the CPI came out a bit hot, and I would like to go over a little bit in that. It's not so much the numbers now, but the language that they frame it with. So it was a little more than they expect. It always sets a move. So with this inflation, if you dig into it a little more, it's auto insurance was a large driver in this. So it spiked over 20%. That's an incredible amount. So we've been talking about insurance and some of the effects it would have. In this particular case, it's auto insurance, but we're going to be seeing more kind of flow through. So moving forward, we've got oil prices that jumped after the airstrikes, as well as gold. Those are fear and safety trades. So with central banks, we've got China's central bank. They're set to cut a key rate. Basically, they're going to be doing some easing. So if you're into foreign exchange, then you probably know that the yuan is about to get a bit weaker if they're going to be flooding their economy with this, especially in relative strength to the dollar. So that will basically put more pressure on our stocks in the United States. I want to bring up one in particular, Boeing Airlines. More downside is expected on lawsuits that are just beginning to come in before this correction is over. I do have some areas where I may be buying into this long term, would be the sub 200. So anyway, not financial advice, just a little of what I'm doing. So with all of this, we've got CVS, Target pharmacies, they're closing them. So they're not the only ones, but also had Walgreens closing 150 stores, and Rite Aid filed for bankruptcy. Okay, so keeping in mind the jobs thing. So Rent the Runway is cutting 10% of their corporate workforce as they lose their chief operating officer. Disney studio Pixar cutting jobs. So we've been talking about these corporate layoffs for a long time. Now they're starting to roll in. Discord cutting 17% of their workforce. And then we've also got Tesla halting most of its output at the factory in Germany. They're talking about global shipping supply parts issues from what's going on there, but they've also got some other issues going on. So with this, when these companies go through these tough times, they have to cut their costs. First cost they cut normally is labor, more unemployment coming. So with her saying we should be happy to have our jobs, well, those are going away as well. So with that, it's encouraging people to kind of gamble, so to speak. We had the Bitcoin ETF come out. Now people are getting more interested in the space. So they kind of walked out on the Vanguard group because they chose not to put these ETFs up for trade. Despite that, the first day, ETFs saw $4.6 billion in volume. So, huge amount of volume in this. It was still, for the price of Bitcoin, came a sell the news event, which we had spoken about. So, I'm long term bullish on Bitcoin. However, we did expect this pullback because historically, not that I'm brilliant, but historically, that's what happens with these, and it just will correct. So it did follow in that pattern. So we've got a billionaire investor, Howard Marks. They don't talk about this much, but he's saying we haven't had a free market in decades since the Federal Reserve has stepped in. So this is, as we always say, it's by design that they're inflating on purpose. But when they do this, there's no price discovery between buyer and seller for stock markets. So normally, if someone would buy something as at an auction or something, would set the price at the price the seller between the seller and buyer creates the market. Now we've got the Federal Reserve just pumping in, everybody's buying. There are incredible distortions, incredible debt. It's a huge threat, and more people will die because of this than these wars going on. But let's go more. So, this is in real estate, talking about how the upper class, everybody's in panic mode. Ultra rich Americans have mansions they can't get rid of, so they're trying to rent them out. $150,000 per month. Why is this a huge issue? Because these people have money. Well, they're getting wiped out as well. I had spoken about this before, how this is going to include many of the wealthy in this downturn. And they are not used to it. Not to say, but many of them don't know how to handle it, and they're not prepared for what is coming. So just bringing this up, I call them the masters of your fate. But we've got Congress making their bets in the stock market in areas they're making decisions. So this is completely corrupt, and we've got more corruption from the banks. Talking about Morgan Stanley nearing deals to pay off their $500 million to quote unquote resolve their trading probe. It doesn't fix anything they did. It's a completely corrupt. They will never go to jail. They pay these fines and they continue. This is, again, reminiscent of Rome, the incredible corruption prior to a fall. So let's go into a little bit more of what's been going on with these strikes now. We've got the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is talking about the joint military strikes with the United States that they authorized. So I want to bring up the United States side because the Secretary of Defense is nowhere to be found since he was hospitalized, has not been out there, and Congress did not approve this. So this is completely unconstitutional from the United States side and will have to be resolved. I believe we're going to hear hopefully, a bit more about this in the coming days. But along with this, and we've got to think about this, he's making a surprise visit to Ukraine to meet with Zelensky and announce they're going to provide £2.5 billion in military aid over the coming year. Now, that's a wonderful surprise. I would love him to show up and say, "Hey, we're just giving you $2.5 billion on a war that is really done." So that's going to cause some issues. We'll go into that probably another time, but not now. So I would like to bring this up. If you're on my Twitter, I brought this up as soon as the news broke that Iran seized a tanker and they started kind of rallying everyone around their cause. It didn't feel right, and so I began to look into it. The seizure of Marshall Islands flagged St. Nicholas. It coincides with weeks of attacks by Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi militias. Okay, so there's more in the story as I thought. The United States seized the Nicholas last year in sanctions enforcement operation under a different name. This was originally an Iranian ship. And we had spoken about this before when the US had taken this Iranian ship and they basically confiscated the oil. So Iran is not very happy about this, not to say, and they said that this move would not go unanswered. So In this quote, after the theft of Iranian oil by the United States last year, St. Nicholas tanker was seized by Iran's Navy this morning with a judicial order. It is en route to Iranian ports. So, the US and UK, if you pay attention to mainstream media, says that the strikes on the sites in Yemen are in self-defense. They also struck their capital. You're talking about Sana'a. So, because of these strikes, they're threatening a heavy price for the US and UK after ally strikes targets in Yemen. So, this is a mess. It's much more involved than they would lead you to believe. So, along with that, the US military also moving fuel closer to Taiwan. There's been a lot of activity that has been passing through Hawaii of late. That is the main stopping point and strategic battlegrounds point in the Pacific Ocean going over to Taiwan. So they're talking about the Taiwan War could cut global GDP by 10%. So as always, there's a lot more going on to this. So the US is sending a delegation to Taiwan to meet with the new president. They've got their elections going on. And basically, they have banned the United States from visiting until the elections are done because they didn't want meddling in their election process. Can't imagine why they would feel that way. That's sarcasm, by the way. So, with all of this going on, Davos 2024, they say the extreme weather and misinformation are top global risks. I disagree. What do you think? By the way, they do control the weather to a good point. That's probably the subject for another lava update at some time. At any rate, at this time, live, trade, and think outside their system. If you haven't yet, please hit that like. I appreciate you all being here. Until I see you again, my friends, stay free.